All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for tonight's hybrid meeting and presentation with the Los Alamos Mountaineers. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone's aware that this presentation is being recorded. I'm Beth Courtwright. I'm the operations manager here at the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEAC, in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And I'll be the moderator for tonight's talk. First, I want to acknowledge our wonderful members, our donors, and our partners like the Mountaineers for all of their generous support. And for details about more PEAC programs, you can visit us at peaknature.org. Just a few logistics for this presentation before we get started. Our presenter will be taking questions via Zoom chat and also from our in-person audience. For those of you watching from home, you can find the chat feature in the menu bar on Zoom. And you can type your questions to the one that says PEAC Moderator into the chat window anytime during the talk, and I will read them during the Q&A at the end. Please remember that not everyone in the room here with us can have a microphone, so there's just going to be a little delay when we're listening to a question from the live audience. Don't worry, we'll be back on in a second to repeat that question for everyone to hear. Last thing is that after the talk, everybody will get a short evaluation in their email. Please do take a minute to fill that out. Your input really helps us to improve our future programs. And without any further ado, I'll pass it over to Evan to start the Mountaineers meeting.
Great, thank you, Beth. Let's see. So welcome to the first meeting of the new year. As part of this, I want to introduce our new board, which is not happening. Do you know how to make that go?
Just click Sylvia, just click the mouse in the middle somewhere. Did you hit the mouse in the middle? Sylvie, in the middle of the, there you go, click it. Now the slide adventure should work. Sorry.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'll start off by showing you who our new members are. Then we'll do trip reports, climbing school, and then the presentation. So just a little bit to do before we get to the presentation. So we elected new board members. This was back in November, and here's the slate that got elected. And then you can see down at the bottom the people who were appointed. We had 3 appointed positions as well, just to familiarize you with the names. And then Sylvie is going to tell us about the trips. I should also mention that we have a financial review committee that will be looking at our books, and those members are Ben Morrow, David Meyerhofer, and John Berg, and we'll hear from them in about a month or so to tell us how the club is doing with its finances.
I'll take that.
Cool, thanks. All right, I'm Sylvie Adam, this year's trip coordinator. We're going back to mid-November. Jean, my predecessor, covered the trips through mid-November, and then potpourri, we don't do our trips, so I'm going back to November. And Claire did a blue dot to red dot with a nice group of people, blue sky, to one of the nice shield petroglyphs. And now when I see that, I think about Bart Olinger, who loved these so much. I know he was a big fan of these shields. Let's see. Jean did the turkey trot this year. That's a Los Alamos event. Crop hunger walk. You can walk it and run it, and you don't have to accept the turkey or the pie if you win the draw. Bill did his annual Bluff 4-day trip with amazing landscape. At first I thought Kathleen was carrying a hair dryer, but it's her poles. See that? Nice trip, Bill. Where's Bill? Hi, Bill. And then Michael did a meetup type gathering at Camp May to talk about options, to share experience about backcountry skiing and snowshoeing. They had a barbecue there, and I think it was a successful, different type of event to get like-minded people together and share their experiences. There was even a little snow in early December. Mid-December, Michael Altair did his AVI refresher with a classroom session and then the outing that ended up being at Cumbres Pass, and it looked like it was quite successful. Michael's nodding yes. There was a snowshoer, it looks like, right? And then the skiers. Good. Thanks, Michael, for providing those. Around Christmas time, Tanya Pietras took a few backpackers down in Big Bend, and I'm sure she has amazing other picture, but that's the only one she had time to share. She's traveling again, so this is just a little hint. I've never been, I'd like to go down there. Bill did a nice local hike at the end of December at Window Rock. Bill did also an Abiquiu mountaineers trip near Ghost Ranch. So keep them coming. These one-day outings are so awesome. Then we got into the snow a little bit. Olivia Lee did a snowshoe trip up to the Blue Bench. Here they are sitting on the Blue Bench. Maybe it needs a coat of paint. It's hard to tell. And nice group there on January 11. 2 days later, Gwendolyn and Dawn took 16 people total for a moonshine on Evershine. Cold but beautiful. We like those full moon trips. And I think Bill went back to Pagosa in Colorado for winter sports, another 4-day trip. Where are you, Melissa? See, I told you you'd be on there. There you go. Good. All right, so that's what we've had since November. Nice. Keep them coming. And then for future trip, what do we have on the books? Mid-February, Zach will do a Mountaineers/Peak snowshoe cross-country outing at Las Conchas. Evan posted his Cabazon Peak, and you managing the demand. If you have to do more than one trip, you got that. It's popular. It's a great outing. So if you're interested, contact Evan. All of those are posted on our website. You can go to the calendar, click on that, and you get the information, how to get in contact with the trip leader. The April Lama trip, that was a Mountaineers trip, is now a trip that you would sign up directly with the Lama guide. His name is BJ Orozco. It's still on our website, so you can get the information there. But you would register and sign up directly with BJ. But Bill has all the information if you need information on that one. And then a Mountaineers trip is now in May 1 to May 9, the Lama Drop Camp in Escalante Country. And Bill is a trip leader for that week. All right, that's what we have coming up. As always, join if not already a member. It's a good deal. And then lead the trips. It's fun. So share your experience, bring people together. If you've never led a trip and it's a little intimidating, get an experienced trip leader to just co-lead with you and get your first one under your belt with the help of a trip leader. So I think that's it. That's what I have for trips. And I'm giving the mic to, am I too close or too far? It's hard to tell. Tony is going to talk about the 2025 climbing school.
Thank you. Let's see. Can I make this work? Okay, so following the last couple of years, we are going to have a climbing school again. It will be, we will use the Mountain Skills Rock Climbing Adventures from Taos as the instructors. We're actually going to have it a bit later than we have in the past because we've been, may not be a problem this year, but we've had snow problems and weather problems. So we're starting April 26th, May 3rd, May 10th, and May 17th. And there will be a makeup day in case of bad weather. That will be May 31st because we don't want to have it over Memorial Day weekend. It will be held outdoors, all outdoors, mostly at Tres Piedras, but also at some of the Taos crags, probably. It kind of depends on the weather and the conditions, you know, where exactly they've held it. And we have had really good experiences with this group of instructors the past 2 years. And certainly you can ask some of the previous participants if you're interested. The cost has remained the same for the past 2 years, 3 years, at $650 per student. Plus, I guess I should remind folks that usually the guides get a tip at the end. So just keep that in mind as an extra expense. The sign up is now online, so people can sign up. I will be sending out an email as well. We do, thanks to the generosity of a few folks, we do have we do have up to 3 scholarships in honor of Jim Strait, and those applications are also online. The selection process is based on need and kind of enthusiasm for the course. The course schedule has not changed over the past few years, but you know, they teach you how to climb. So you don't have to have any climbing experience. You learn to belay, which is really important. You learn to put up anchors. There's an introduction to trad, although I don't think there's really trad climbing, just following. And then cleaning of the anchors. You do get a lot of climbing in. So I guess we would like applications by April 1st, so we know who's going to be attending, and we do need about 7 folks to sign up to run the course. And so the picture up there is from last year. It's I think at Tres Piedras. And we are looking for a couple of experienced climbers to just help out during the sessions. And I'll be reminding folks of that later on. So any questions? I will. In addition, we are going to hold two classes here at Peak, March 11th, March 18th, on knots. And Kai Davis has graciously agreed to run those 2 classes. So that is actually joint with Peak. So, and the sign up is through Peak. There's a maximum of 20 people that can attend just because of the space. So that's it. And I guess I'll pass it on to...
Can you just click to the next one? Thank you. Okay, I'm Ann Satsangi, program coordinator for this year, and I'm excited to welcome Jim to join us and share with us the photography talk. I want to introduce a little bit about Jim. He is a photographer based right here in Los Alamos in northern New Mexico, specializing in landscapes, weather, and the night sky. His passion for photography was sparked as a child, inspired by the vivid images in photo books and National Geographic magazine. His parents gave him a small camera over 40 years ago, and he was captivated and never looked back. After spending some years away from Los Alamos, he returned in 1999, and that's when he was committed to refining his photographic skills. New Mexico's dramatic landscapes, ever-changing weather, and mesmerizing night skies provide endless inspiration. Few spaces offer such a perfect convergence of mountains, canyons, deserts, and star-filled horizons. Jim's artistic vision is influenced by a broad appreciation of creative disciplines, including classical paintings, portraiture, abstract art, sculpture, music, and architecture. Each has shaped how Jim approaches photography and has guided him to seek out light, texture, and form in every scene he captures. Ultimately, his goal is to create images that evoke wonder and emotion, offering a fresh perspective on the beauty of the world around us. So as we get out in our outdoor endeavors of the mountaineers, I'm sure we all take photography and will appreciate the wonder around us as Jim has been able to capture.
All right, can you all hear me? Is this working? Awesome, great. Well, I see some familiar faces out there. First of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me to come speak at your monthly meeting. This is definitely an honor. I've been paying attention to your club for quite some time, and you do have a pretty active following and something to be appreciated. So, my name is Jim Stein. Oh, by the way, I also want to thank Peak, and especially Beth Courtwright, who has helped me through the technicalities of all this, because I wasn't sure what to expect on this. And this is what a venue, huh? This is a really neat venue for you guys to have your monthly meeting. You have all your monthly meetings here. Is that how it works? This is really, really neat. So my name is Jim Stein. I'm going to talk to you tonight about my photography and my journey in photography. When I was putting this together, I was wondering, I was talking at dinner tonight, I was trying to figure out how to put together a presentation for 45 minutes that wasn't about photography, that wasn't a slideshow, just clicking thousands of images that has no context. I don't know if you all remember, but I remember when I was a little kid getting dragged to slideshows by my parents to somebody's house, watching them go on some vacation and seeing hundreds of photos of people who I had no idea who they were. I promise you I'm not going to do that tonight. So that was first and foremost on my mind. But how I'm going to present this to you, I'm going to give you a little background, although Ann has already actually given you a lot more background than I was planning on doing. Anyway, some of the influences through my photographic journey, some of the awards that I have received over the years with the images. But most of all, what I wanted to highlight in this presentation is my photography and how I go about some of my thinking process of going about taking the photos that I take, primarily in landscapes, weather, and the night sky. So I'll show you a number of images with some details of those images and how I took them, and hopefully that will be provide some valuable information for you in how I put this together, plus a little bit of background on each of the photos. And then I'll also have an ending page where you can more of my photography and my videos. Actually, I also produce videos. Okay, so my background. So as Han mentioned, I am a native here of Los Alamos. I grew up here all my life. I was not born here, but I here all my life. I was a graduate of the high school up here at 1985. And I did move away after I graduated, went to college, Arizona State University, and then right after that I moved to Washington, D.C. for my first job. That lasted for about 10 years. Had a great time. Had a great experience in terms of photography in Washington, but it wasn't really necessarily a serious endeavor for me at that point, even though I've always had a camera. I always loved photography. Met my now wife in Washington, even though she is from New Mexico as well. And we decided to move back to New Mexico. We moved back here, my hometown in Los Alamos, back in 1999. And that was when photography for me really took off as a serious pursuit. I have worked here at LAM for the past 22 years, and I just now recently retired. I graduated from LAM in October. Yay. Great career at LAM, great place to work. But I am glad I'm done. And hi, Gene, how you doing? And very rewarding, but really it took a lot of my time away from photography. And now I'm really happy that I'm going to be able to spend a lot more time doing it. So this is where it all began, right here. This thing. I took this photo actually 2 days ago when I was putting this together. I still have this camera. This is a camera my parents gave to me back in 1980, 81-ish. Olympus OM2. I was talking to Bill Prodorsky tonight. He has an OM1, and the OM2, when it was given to me as a gift from my parents, it was a revolutionary camera at the time because it had a built-in light meter. Think about that. That was the biggest thing back then was with this camera is a built light meter. They don't even talk about light meters now in cameras. You know, you have these things now, right? You know, imagine there's a light meter in there somewhere. It has to have a light meter, right? And for it to be able to automatically take the photo for you and develop it. All right in here. It's a film camera, obviously, but still have that camera. I'll always have it till the day I die. It's been a big part of the journey. Influences. Tons of influences, as Ann mentioned. I'll just highlight the Hudson River School. It's a mid-19th century art movement founded by Thomas Cole in the Catskills of New York. Great hotbed of art, literature, architecture in that small little area. This had a fairly large following at the time because, as you can tell, I don't know if you're like me, but when I look at these images, there are grand, expansive landscapes shaped by light, directional light, and we'll get into that a little bit in this talk. Lots of emotion that come out of these images, for me at least. And I will say that these images, if you're not familiar with them, look them up. There's, I don't know how many artists that were part of this movement, maybe in the hundreds at that time. Some of the more well-known, maybe in the 50 plus number. But the ones that I have really were attracted to, Thomas Cole, who, like I said, was the founder. Frederick Church, who is a student of Thomas Cole. Actually, they lived across the river, Hudson River, from each other. And of course, Albert Bierstadt, who has, I'm not sure how this image down here on the bottom right is one of his most famous ones. He traveled throughout the western U.S. back in the late 1800s, before people really traveled from the east out here actually, and was able to capture these. I would say, for me, absolutely beautiful art, but also very, I would say, embellished as well, because I don't think you can find that scene, even though it was supposed to be in the Sierra Nevadas. But you can, back in the 1800s, you can get away with that. So, plus it's art, which you can get away with a lot anyway. Of course, Ansel Adams was a huge influence on me as well. Two of his most famous photographs. And I'm sure everybody's heard of Ansel Adams and have seen a lot of his photographs, but you'll see in some of my photos some of the things I've tried to emulate as well. There's a great documentary on Ansel Adams that talked about this particular photograph, which is 20 miles from here in Hernandez, and the church is still there. Can't see it very easily from the highway, but the church is still there. And I always thought about, maybe driving down there when the moon was coming up at that time, whatever time of the year it was, or time of the month, to see if I can actually envision it myself. Also, what Ansel Adams did is the post-processing. Okay, it's great. One thing is, going out and taking the photo, right? The photos were, immaculate by themselves. But the way he was able to process the photo in a way that brought out the vision that he had is just something, for me, very emotional, especially when you have these dark skies, the bright foregrounds, lots of contrast, and you can incorporate the sky when you have a nice dramatic dynamic sky as well. Just absolutely amazing what he was able to do and capture. Some of the contemporary influences are still around today. Actually, all these guys are much younger than me at this time. But Michael Shainblum is, if you don't know who these folks are, I encourage you to look them up. They all have social media pages as well, but look them up on their websites. I've learned a lot from these folks, even though I don't know them except for one. But I learned a lot of my photographic techniques as well as my post-processing from these folks, Michael Shainblum being first and foremost in terms of the night sky. He has some great imagery of the night sky, and he does a lot of teaching as well in terms of how he goes about doing the night sky photography as well as post-processing. Mark Adamus, another, if you want to see somebody who can really emulate the Hudson River School artists, that's the guy. And you look at his stuff and you're like, this is not real. This is AI. Well, he started doing this well before AI. His stuff is not AI, but it's just absolutely amazing what he can do with a camera. Nick Page, Albert Droz, Adam Gibbs, and then a really good friend of mine, Wayne Suggs, as well. He's a well-known photographer. He's actually based here in New Mexico, down in Las Cruces. Super guy. I would definitely look him up as well. He actually conducts workshops, photographic workshops. Okay. So this is the part where I get a little kind of weird because I don't like talking about myself too much. But these are, my wife said, no, you got to show the list of awards that you've received over the years. So this is actually what I have been awarded over the last several years. I'll just say this right now. I don't submit too many of my photographs to photo contests. But the one exception that I've always done was New Mexico Magazine. They're very reputable. They've done it forever. They have people who know what they're doing, and they it's the oldest state magazine in the country. They have a lot of reputation that's behind them that they have to uphold and preserve. Always been very impressed by how they ran their photo contest. So that's why I've submitted photos to them starting back in 2017. That was the first year that I actually submitted something, and lo and behold, I won second place. I'll go through all of these actually here as we go. The most recent one, so I'll go back in chronological order backwards. The last one I won was in 2023. The grand prize, Sunset Storm, was the title I gave to this, and I think probably everybody can recognize where this was, right? Fantastic day. I mean, this was just amazing. It didn't start out that way. I will tell you, it was a dark, gloomy day. I was way up in this area, back in the Via San Antonio area at the time, and there was no photographic opportunity whatsoever. You had these dark clouds everywhere, and of course, I was driving out. I was leaving. I was back on the highway when I was leaving, and the clouds opened up at the very bottom. And I will say, I'll mention this again later on, but when you have a opening right along the horizon, it may be completely cloudy. You may think nothing is going to happen at all, or you've just given up on the day, which, to be honest with you, that's what I did. I had already given up on the day. But if you have an opening right at the end, when the sun's going down, you're going to have something like this. So always remember that when you're out, look at the horizon, especially where the sun's going down. And if you have an opening there, good chances are you're going to have the sky just blow up. And that's what happened here. Of course, I was on the highway heading home. Couldn't happen when I was right back out there, but I don't think I could have gotten a better view of it anyway. So anyway, very proud of this photograph. I'll never forget that evening. Same year, I won first place in the landscape category as well. Same conditions. I turned this into a black and white. This is after a storm hit White Sands. Matter of fact, I don't know have you ever been to White Sands after a big rainstorm? The parking lots are lakes because there's nowhere for the water to go. And it was a lake when I showed up. Basically, my feet were already soaked by the time I got to the dunes. I was hiking on these dunes, hoping that there was going to be some kind of opening with the sky. And sure enough, here I'm looking west here, and sure enough, the light opened up, or the clouds opened up for the light to come through. Gave this great view of the dunes. Very proud of this photo as well. It means a lot to me. Previous year, again, this is in the Valles Caldera. Won an honorable mention award for this photo. This is one where it's the middle of the day. Again, clouds. I love the dynamic, emotional sky. That was the subject to a lot of degree, even though we had a lot of nice little sun openings on the field, on the grass out there. This is actually Via San Antonio. It's not the Via Grande. And lo and behold, there was lightning going through, and it was the middle of the day. I usually don't shoot lightning during the middle of the day, nor do I shoot lightning very far from my truck. But this one, I was well away from my truck. And I didn't expect lightning to come through that day. So I slapped on a neutral density filter, which actually I'll get into that a little bit here. But what that does is it lengthens your shutter speed. So hopefully, I was thinking maybe I'll get lucky and be able to capture some lightning. It was the only lightning I was able to capture that day, and I was lucky. Another great afternoon. Love that afternoon. This is a really special image for me. So my parents, they passed away back in 2014. My mom loved rainbows. She absolutely loved rainbows. I was leaving, this is probably the most photographed area in the Valles Caldera, right? You're leaving, you're going across the bridge, and you see this view. And I happened to see it, it was chucking down rain. It was raining hard. But then I saw a glimpse of, I don't know if you can actually see the rainbows here. It's a double rainbow on the top here. I was like, I think I could probably do that. So I was sitting out there in the rain, waiting for the light, because the light was coming in and out pretty quickly because the clouds were moving pretty fast. And sure enough, got some nice light for this with the rainbows, because the rainbows weren't there all the time. It was just sporadic. Really special for me because this was actually taken on my mom's birthday. And again, an honorable mention award in 2022. Some of my night sky stuff, I was out with my brother that night. This is up off of Coach D Canyon area in the Jemez. and with the lights of Albuquerque in the background. By the way, I'll just say, you know, light pollution, it's here to stay, right? There's nothing, even though I wish it would, there's things we could all do about it, but I've just embraced light pollution to a point where I've incorporated it as an element where I can. And I think for this, it actually worked out pretty well. Hamas, another photograph. This was actually taken on Christmas Day, 2020, I believe. It just snowed, and I just said, you know, what the heck, I'm going to get up. It was before the sun actually came up. I left, drove up there. It was pretty interesting driving up there. Got my snowshoes on, went out and took this photo. I have another one here. I'll show you in a second. Keep going. This is my Ansel Adams. Okay. I will say this is a day where, you know, you'll hear photographers say if it's a nice, beautiful day, bluebird sky day, you know, it's great day to be out. Well, these are usually horrible days to go out and photograph because there's nothing going on in the sky. Just plain open nothingness. Well, was out by Cabazon Peak, and my brother and I, we actually decided, you know, let's go home. You know, bright sunlight, really harsh, contrasty light. And then we were leaving, and we both saw this view with the sun, with the moon coming up over Cabazon, and got my 135 millimeter lens and was able to take that photo. Probably my favorite photo I've taken right here. This is one that started it all for me. This is the very first photograph that I won an award. This is again the same area where the other night sky photo was taken. I got lucky on this one. This is the first time I was able to actually get the Milky Way and a lightning bolt in one photo, even though I tried for I don't know how long to do that. And I wasn't even expecting it because by the time I got out there, that storm had already died down to the point where it was really nothing. There was no lightning at all. Got out a 21 millimeter lens, and I noticed the Milky Way coming out and started taking photographs. It was, you know, this is actually a panorama photograph. It's 3 photographs, portrait style, one after the other. And I started on this side. I wasn't expecting it because again, there was no lightning, and then boom, that hit. And I was like, wow, I might have something here. I just kept on, you know, took the other 2 photos immediately. And I was just hoping that I was able to get that photo or the bolt there. And sure enough, I had it on the back of my camera. It's like, I think I can make something out of this. But won second place that year, and that's where it pretty much started for me. That was the first year I submitted something. Okay, that didn't come out very well, I guess. We can wing it here. So what I wanted to do here is just talk a little bit about photographic style and principles and some of the things that are really important to learn when you're going out and becoming serious about photography. And that is, the first thing is the exposure triangle. As I say, this is where the magic begins. If you understand the relationship between ISO, aperture, shutter speed, and what those are, and you have a fundamental understanding that you change one, well, first of all these are linked, okay? If you change one, in order to keep the same exposure, you have to make changes to the other 2, one or both of the other 2. And if you start understanding how that works and how that works within your camera, then you can start doing a lot of neat stuff. And you can do a lot of what I like to do, a lot of experimentation. So obviously shutter speed, when you start at shutter speed, that's very easy. That's how long the shutter in your camera stays open. The aperture is like the iris in your eye. You know, that is the opening, how big that opening in your eye is, or how big that opening in your lens is for any given shot. And those are represented by these numbers here. If you notice here, the bigger the number, F11, the smaller that iris is. The larger the iris, the smaller the number. So that's one tricky thing you always have to keep in mind. The larger the number, the smaller the aperture. The smaller the number, the larger the aperture. And obviously, the larger the aperture, the more light you get onto your camera, on your image. ISO is the more difficult one to understand, but that is really how sensitive your sensor is. Again, that is gathering light. The capability of your sensor is to gather light. Now, there's drawbacks for every one of these. Photography is a compromise. Every turn that you do in photography, it's a compromise. The lower the shutter speed, of course, you're going to have more blur, right? And this is represented on the outside here. These are the compromises. Higher shutter speed, less motion blur. Lower shutter speed, more blur. Okay, so you got to count that in to your image. Your aperture, same thing. It's more about depth of field. How much is it going to be in focus? All right, you have a large aperture, the shallower your depth of field is. You know, you see some of the classic portraits, portrait photography. Those are usually around in this area where the aperture is really, really wide open. It is focusing on their eyes, and everything else is blurred, right? But when you do that, you're increasing light that goes in. So that is a drawback at some of your photographs. ISO, granted, you can go, pretty high on your ISO setting, but what that does, it introduces grain and noise onto your image. Although you might be able to take photos in the dark with it, which comes in handy sometimes when you're doing night sky. I'm not sure what I had here. Composition perspective is perspective, balance, form, texture, light, tone, color. Those are pretty self-explanatory. Did want to say a little bit about digital formats. Not talking film here. We're just talking digital. I always shoot in raw digital format, because that is the pure image. It's capturing everything the sensor can possibly pick up, putting it on a file. It looks really horrible straight out of the camera. It's very washed out. It doesn't have any color, no contrast. But the idea is you extract what you need out of that to make the image the way you want it, or the way you saw it. JPEGs are usually what comes out of your phone. When you take a picture of your phone, those are JPEGs. Your cameras can do, you can do a JPEG image. Very handy if you're doing a ton of photos and you need to get them off to somewhere. But really, you got to keep in mind that the camera is actually doing the processing for you. You're not doing any of the processing, the camera is doing it. And being able to process it after it's turned into a JPEG becomes very, very difficult. You don't have the latitude that you would have with a raw photo. Okay, so want to go into the three areas: landscapes, weather, night sky, and give you a little bit of background on what I think about when I go out and take each of those three genres of photography. Start at for landscapes. Usually for landscape photography, people are using zoom lenses. I prefer prime lenses, to be honest with you. I grew up learning on prime lenses, manual focus lenses actually. Zooms are usually something I always use for some of my, trail run races, I primarily use a zoom for those, but for the most part, I'm always using a prime. But for landscapes, for people that are starting out, zooms are very, very good to have because of the flexibility that you can get. And plus, today, in today's age, they're making zoom lenses almost as good as they're making prime lenses. It's always been the case where prime lenses were very superior to zooms because there was less glass in the lenses and less artifacts. Plus, prime lenses are much faster. You can capture images in much darker light. But today, it's that gap is pretty much zero. Talked about speed. For the most part, 95% of my images for landscapes, for weather, as well as night sky, I'm using a tripod. There's a lot of talk back and forth in terms of should you use a tripod, should you not. For me, that's part of the photographic experience. I love using a tripod, slows me down, and it lets me take in the entire experience. What I do, though, and I highlighted it, I usually go out and I handhold for composition. I go out there and try to find a composition, taking the camera, moving it here and there, up and down, finding the right composition, and then I'll put it on a tripod. For settings, it's whatever the image is that's in front of you. Anything goes. Some areas to keep in mind, in terms of getting those, I would say unique images. Try some of these types of things if you're really wanting to have a good landscape image. Shoot the golden hour. Golden hour is usually an hour before sunset, or vice versa in the morning, an hour after sunrise. Blue hour is also, it's the hour before sunrise and hour after sunset. But at least do the golden hour because that will give you a lot of neat color in your images in the landscape. It'll also give you that directional light that I talked about earlier, and it will. When you have directional light, you have a lot of depth in your images. Incorporate near to far elements. You may have a cactus in front and gigantic mountain in the back. Incorporate both of those. Try to do that. Already talked about late afternoon, early mornings. The directional light. Use light as an element. Shoot to the side of the sun where the sun is coming up, or even use the sun as a backdrop. I try to do that a lot. Sometimes it doesn't work that well, but again, experiment. Utilize negative space. When I talked about these images here, white sands, I'm using a lot of negative space in here, which for me, I loved how that negative space element contributed to those photographs. Don't necessarily have to do black and white to utilize negative space, but again, people think about, well, you didn't have anything. There's nothing, going back to the Cabazon photo, right? I was able to get something out of that because I had the moon rising, but that is negative space as well that I incorporated in that photo. And shoot black and white. I love black and white photos. I love doing black and whites. Obviously, I'm shooting in color because I have a modern digital camera, but converting it to black and white is, for the right photo, works out really, really nicely. So I'm going to go through some photos here. I'm going to go fairly quickly because, again, I don't want to be that parent showing you photographs or slides of people on vacation. You have no idea, but I mainly put the information on the right here so you can see what went into this image, my settings, the lens, the camera, the lens, the settings, and then just some and how I set it up. I mostly always shoot manual, so you'll see this being a common theme, manual shooting. So that includes the ISO, shutter speed, and the aperture. I set those manually for all my images as much as I possibly can. And you'll see, how I went about taking this photo. Obviously, here's an example where I was using the sun as a backdrop. I was shooting into the sun, again, at the Valles Caldera. The Valles Caldera, if you can't tell, is one of my muses, as Seth back there will attest to. But this is a pond, my favorite pond out there. I'm not going to tell where this is, but you probably know where it is. But low to the ground, shooting low to the ground, sun at the horizon. Provided with the lens that I was using was a Zeiss lens, one of my favorite lenses. It provided this nice on the lens element, which a lot of people don't like, but I kind of liked it. Again, I was, sun was breaking through the lower clouds. This was always a good sign. Wide angle lens, 15 millimeters, was really, really wide. Directional light coming through, hitting the tops of the grass. And when you're shooting that wide, you really don't need to worry about depth of field. But I was pretty low to the ground, so I was trying to shoot as high, an f-stop as I possibly could. So down at the Bosque del Apache, I was actually taking pictures of birds, and sunset hit, and I forgot about the birds after I saw this. I don't know about you, but trees make good subjects. Cottonwoods make awesome subjects, especially cottonwoods in the winter, for some reason for me. But it was hitting the branches of this tree in such a way where I just stopped taking pictures of birds. Of course, I was using a telephoto lens because I was taking pictures of birds, but I zoomed out quite a bit to take in this scene with the sunset coming through. Of course, it was cloudy that day. Again, late afternoon, clouds opened up at the bottom, and you get this nice directional light. Remember that when you're out there. You're thinking, this is going to be a boring sunset. Well, it wasn't. Even though there was no color that day, that's why I turned this into a black and white. But yeah, basically you can read this for yourself in terms of how I set this up. And by the way, I'll take questions about any of these after we're done. So this was taken that same day that, I don't know if you remember the photo that I took on Christmas Day when snowshoeing. Just turn the camera around. That is the actual Los Conchas mountain. And again, sun was over here in the top left, directional light coming down. Just really provides a nice contrast to the image, as well. With that contrast, also opens up the depth. And again, sorry, my settings and what I was doing there, using a fairly my wide angle zoom. Of course, I told you I don't like using zoom. Well, I was using zoom that day. But I don't know why I was using the zoom that day. I think it was mainly because I was on my snowshoes and I didn't want to continue changing lenses. That is the downside of using primes. Okay, so this is Oregon. Multnomah Falls, probably one of the most photographed waterfalls in the world. Raining and dogs that day. Got extremely wet. This was really good to have a Canon camera at the time because those are built like tanks. But horrible conditions, but great for photography. And the other great thing about it is there's nobody there. And I don't think that ever happened the entire trip. Yeah, bridge is clear. But here's one thing I'll just mention with this is, I was trying to get a little shutter speed so I can get the nice dreamy water effect of the falls. Didn't really have to work hard on doing that because it was pretty dark anyway, because it was raining. But you can see with my settings, again, going back to that exposure triangle, I had a fairly small aperture, letting in less light, keeping things in focus. Went way below what I would normally do for my sensitivity on my sensor, which is also decreasing the amount of light or the amount of light your sensor is picking up, which was giving me a 1.6 second shutter speed. And that was just enough to get that effect. Again, tripod is a must for these kinds of shots, for me at least. So there are with the cameras that are out today, you can handhold a camera for 1.6 seconds and not have it blurred because of the image stabilization of the cameras. But my hands shake too much. There's no way I can do that. So yeah, one of my favorites as well. Sutton Hamus, this is East Fork. Was just there this morning, actually. It's all frozen over, by the way, if you haven't been up there. It's completely frozen over, but it's the trail's somewhat clear. Again, I was trying to soften the water, so I was trying to lessen the shutter speed. Had a fairly small, well, really small f-stop with my normal ISO setting. I was using a Sony zoom, but I wanted to get that 12 millimeter, and that was shot at 12 millimeters. I don't have a 12 millimeter prime lens. But essentially the same kind of deal, same kind of philosophy as the previous one. This is up at Ghost Ranch. I called this photo Random Divinity because I was just right off the road, the dirt road. You go up there, and I just saw this church. I never saw it before. Well, it turned out this was a movie prop, a movie set. This does not exist anymore, by the way. So I'm glad I took a photo of it when I did. But it's just random. You're just driving up there and you see the church. But here, obviously, I have a number of competing elements I tried to work in. I was using, again, a really wide angle lens, but I wanted to capture that beautiful sky, the dramatic sky, as well as the church and the beautiful landscape up at Ghost Ranch. So in this situation, it really wasn't that hard to do the calculations for the settings, and really the only thing that I would say about this is, the wide angle helped tremendously. And when you're using, I always try to use the lowest ISO that I can to minimize that noise in your camera, in your sensor. This is in upstate New York, near where my brother lives, in the Finger Lakes area. Again, same kind of philosophy as the other waterfall and water images. Trying to get that slow shutter speed, and by doing that, this time I think I had an ND filter for this, a neutral density filter. Yeah, there it is. So you can buy these filters, put on the lens, that reduces the amount of light going through your lens, and therefore you can open up the shutter speed or lengthen the shutter speed to make that nice dreamy look. I just love that look. I love doing that kind of work. White sands, this is actually during a sandstorm, a pretty intense sandstorm. I was using, so when you go to white sands, you want to get some really, really neat photographs. Use a really wide angle lens or use a very long telephoto lens. You can get some really, really neat imagery from both. Obviously, I was using a 400 millimeter on this lens. Again, late afternoon, late directional light. The sun was over here on the upper right, going down. Again, late afternoon, it's magic. That golden hour is the magic hour. When you use those long lenses, you compress. You have this optical illusion that you're compressing all these dunes together, right? It really doesn't look that way to your naked eye, but when you put it on a lens like this, you get this nice compression look. And for me, this is the kind of white sands, classic white sands, late afternoon imagery that I love. The tricky thing about this, the wind was blowing like crazy. So I really needed to bump up the shutter speed quite a bit, even though I was using a tripod. But the tripod in this situation was actually working against me because you have vibration in the legs, and it's actually sometimes just better to handhold it when you have that kind of condition. So that was really the focus, is how can I get this fast enough that I don't have that vibration, I can keep things in focus. And my settings were based pretty much on that. Again, this is a recurring theme. I probably should have added some other types of photos, but I just love these photos. But again, same kind of deal. This time I was actually using a telephoto zoom, and I was at the short end of this telephoto at 100 millimeters, which is still pretty long. Did use an ND filter for this one to again reduce that light intake to get that nice dreamy look on the water. I use that telephoto to emphasize the details that you see here. Because I really wanted to capture, these little parts. For some reason, I just get captivated by these little things that are on the side, and I just spend hours just trying to figure out where to point my lens. But again, same kind of philosophy as the other in terms of my settings. All right, so we're going to go to the night sky. So I will say for the night sky, this is where obviously, where you want to use a fast prime lens versus a zoom. Mainly because the prime lenses that you can get are much faster, which means when they say fast lens, that means you can bring in more light into the camera using that lens versus a zoom lens, which usually zoom lenses are, the widest they will go is around f2.8, and those are very expensive lenses. Prime lenses, they can go down to 1, even 1.2, 1.4. Which you think about, it brings in, if you think about the scale of the aperture, you can bring in a lot more light. It's, at least a stop, 2 stops, maybe even 3 stops if you can get a really, really fast prime lens. So I usually shoot for my night sky is around 14 millimeter, 24 millimeter. I will experiment a little higher. When you go too high, like this 135 to 600, I have used those focal lengths too, but there's definite downsides when you're going that far. Mainly you're fighting the speed of the Earth rotating. The higher the focal length, the less you can keep your shutter open. Because if you think about, I forgot how, somebody probably here knows how fast the Earth is rotating, but it really gets magnified when you get up to 600 millimeters. So usually I stick with the 600 for like moon rises and that sort of thing. But for these types of photos with the tree here or the star trails or, basically these two, I'm using a 24 or wider lens. This was used with a 400 millimeter lens in Portland. I don't know if you could see Mount Hood back there in the distance, but this was a full moonrise that night. Again, based on what I just said, the key here is to capture as much light as possible for the given shutter speed that you're using. Okay. There's rotation is the biggest thing that you're fighting against. One simple rule when you're out there taking these photos is what they call the 500 rule. There's people call it now the 400 rule or even the 600 rule, but I think the 500 rule is sort of the standard. But basically, what that is, you take 500 and divide that with your whatever focal length that you're using, and that should equal around where your shutter, maximum shutter speed should be. I usually try to go a little bit below whatever that number is, mainly because I'm using a fairly high megapixel camera, and you can start seeing star trails pretty easily, even at the 500 rule. Aperture, obviously, again, the key is to capture as much light, so you want to have it wide open, your lowest f-stop number. I try to, if I have a 1.4 millimeter or 1.4 aperture lens, I may go up to 2, because another compromise is, when you're at 1.4, the image quality, there's degradations occurring within your lens at that. You get lens aberrations when you're at those extremes. Again, they're making lenses really, really good these days, so it's not as big of a problem, but you still have a better image if you bring that f-stop up a little bit. The ISO, you're trying to make your sensor a little bit more sensitive, so you bump up your ISO a little bit further, but also you got to be careful about adding too much noise to your image. So when you're going out and do this, obviously one thing I didn't put on here is probably the first bullet I would have put on here. I should have put on here is go out during the day, scope out where you want to take the photos, especially if you want to incorporate near to far elements, foreground elements. Go out during the day, be knowledgeable of where you're actually shooting. And then obviously know where the night sky objects are. The Milky Way is always there, except it moves up and down to the right as the year goes on. Right now, I'll just say the Milky Way is always visible. I have that right here. Milky Way is always out there. It's always above us. The core of the Milky Way, which is the center of the Milky Way, there's a black hole right here. It is not visible during the winter. Like right now, it is actually starting to come up way early in the morning now, but during the winter months, it's usually not visible. But the Milky Way is always there. Know the moon cycles. Know where the moon is, where it's going to rise, where it's going to set. These are always great subjects here. And then there's, obviously constellations. The Big Dipper is always a favorite one. The Cassiopeia and the Andromeda Galaxy, you can get some really neat photos of them, especially if you go into more deep sky stuff like what you have sitting over there. You can attach cameras to that as well, which I'm struggling to stay away from that because that's a whole nother learning curve and expense that I don't really want to go into right now, but I'm really fascinated with that kind of photography. The other thing I will say, shoot early night with some light left in the sky, because you get some really nice blues. You get some blues out of that. Like these still had some light in the sky. When it's really, really dark, I think it's mostly personal preference, but I kind of like to have that color that's in the sky itself. Okay, this is the very first Milky Way photo that I actually sold. I took that I actually sold. This was taken, when was it? I can't even remember how long ago this was. I was shooting a 5D Mark III, which is a really, really old camera with a totally manual lens, manual everything lens. And I really didn't know what I was doing. I actually used a light element underneath the picnic table. By the way, this is Overlook Park. This was actually 4th of July, the morning of 4th of July. You could tell with the sky, it's a lot darker, right? But I really didn't know what I was doing. But when I took these photos, I was like, I was hooked. I mean, I did not go back after taking these. Again, you have light pollution. I use that as an element. I actually added my own light pollution with this little light that was underneath the table top here. I don't do that kind of stuff anymore, but I thought it provided, at the time, it provided a neat element. 22 seconds. So again, I was using a 14 millimeter lens. My maximum at that time, of course, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know if I knew about the 500 rule at the time. But I think I was just playing around, saying, all right, well, 22 seconds, I don't see any light or star trails. So based on that, and then of course I was using the most wide open aperture I could on that. The only real variable that I had was, the ISO and, playing around with ISO and the shutter speed. Probably don't know where this is. This is in a city, Northern California. Bridge is kind of obscure. What I was trying to do here, I was intentionally doing star trails. I don't really do that anymore. But this is not Photoshop. Although Photoshop helped me put this together, but this is actually around 80 exposures taken consecutively over time at 5 seconds. Wide open lens. I was using a 24 millimeter lens. Again, that old vintage camera that at the time I was using. It was a digital camera, but it's an early Canon digital camera. I think it was like 18 megapixels or something like that. There's plenty of ambient light because of the city. So I didn't really have to go too high. I always try to go as low as I can with the ISO to keep that noise out. This was a blended photo, which when you blend multiple photos together, it actually takes out that noise for you anyway. So I really didn't have to worry about the noise. This is about, I don't know. I think it was 80 exposures, 5 seconds each. Didn't know how this was going to turn out until I got home, because I didn't put it together until I got home. But it was a nice night. My wife and my son were with me that night, so it was a nice little memory at least. Again, this is up near the Cochise Canyon area, up in the Jemez, Milky Way, very similar to the Overlook Park. This time I was using a little more modern equipment. This is a blend. So full disclosure, okay? Photoshop should be used, okay? I don't like creating images through Photoshop, so everything here is real, okay? But the way I use Photoshop is to be able to do stuff like this. This was an image where after sunset, I took a photo, I planted the camera on the tripod, didn't touch the tripod or camera after I put it down. Took a photo of the foreground, and you'll see my settings there for the foreground. And then I think it was 20 minutes later, it was pretty dark, okay, when I took this, but I was able to get a 1.6 second exposure at f9, which again allows you to get most of everything in focus, okay, at f9. Probably this stuff I probably couldn't get in focus at f9. And a very low ISO, so very little noise. For the sky, I waited about 20 minutes, took a photo of the sky, same place. Again, I didn't touch the camera. I was using a little electronic shutter. And at these settings, 10 seconds, f4 at ISO 600 or 1600. And then I blended the two in post. I don't really do this that much anymore, because I'll tell you right now, the cameras that are coming out, you can take this photo in just one shot these days, with the cameras that they have. You don't have to do this anymore. But I figure 20 minutes between exposures. I'm not breaking too many rules by doing that. If you're a purist, I for the most part, I'm probably an 85% purist when it comes to photography. But I start thinking about Ansel Adams and what he did in post. I was telling people at dinner tonight that Ansel Adams, as far as I'm concerned, was the grandfather of Photoshop. Exactly, the Artful Dodger. But again, I don't really do that much, mainly because the cameras are still good these days. Can anyone guess where that is? That's your Pajarito Mountain right there. Again, Milky Way shot. This is actually when the Milky Way had gone below the horizon, but even though I was looking at a mountain at the time, so the core of the Milky Way is probably right down in this area. Still, this is an example where you can still get Milky Way shots when the core is not visible. 15 seconds. This time I'm using very modern camera equipment. Sony A7R4, 16-35. Again, I was using a zoom. I don't know why I said I always use primes when I'm just showing you zooms here. Trust me, I use primes mostly, okay? But 15 seconds, I was at 16 millimeter. That's, probably, that's not really, it's faster than the 500 rule, but, I probably could have gone down on the ISO a little bit, increased the shutter speed a little bit more. But with this camera, very, very little noise as well. You can shoot at that high of an ISO with this camera without much noise. This is an example where I was trying to incorporate a foreground element. And I had everything pretty much wide open. I was trying to increase ISO. Again, I probably didn't need to go that high. And then I said it was, loosely based on the 500 rule. This was just taken either last summer or the summer before. This is the camera I'm actually using today. This in an A1. Very fast prime lens, f1.4, 13 seconds. This is an example where that aperture, that speed of that lens helped me here because I did not have to go very high with the ISO. This is where those fast lenses come in handy. So again, I'm embracing light pollution in this to a large degree. This actually looks a lot better on my website, so go check out my website. But trying to incorporate the city lights out in the distance. I think there was a storm out there. I have some videos on my YouTube channel. There's a time-lapse video I created from I think it was this night that's on there. Go check that out. By the way, subscribe to my YouTube. I think I only have like 5 subscribers on my YouTube, so I am trying to. I recently found out that they have an algorithm. Have you all heard about this? You ever heard about this algorithm? So if the more subscribers you get over a period of time, it bumps you up in priority in terms of what people are seeing. And I never knew that. I'm just so dumb with, I'm a novice when it comes to social media. So I think I have like 5 or 6 subscribers. So go on my YouTube and subscribe, and maybe more people. I'll have to check out and see if y'all subscribe. I'll check it next week, and I'll check it the week after, and I'll see if my videos start actually being shown out there. But anyway, yeah. Okay, this is an example where I actually used a telephoto lens. Don't do this that often, but I said, this area looks pretty cool in the core of the Milky Way. And then, of course, I had these trees. Great form. When you're talking about composition, form is a big part of your imagery that you strive for. So I'm going to try 85. I think this is the first time I actually tried an 85 millimeter telephoto, and I thought it came out pretty well. Again, it looks a lot better on my website. I don't want to say. I mean, it's hard to get the calibrations on image. This is actually a really good setup, but I was actually able to get some gas clouds that are in the Milky Way on this. And I was pretty impressed with how that one came out. Again, this is a broken record. I will say though, again, Earth rotation. I was fighting that Earth rotation. The more powerful lens you have, the less of a shutter speed you're going to be able to, maximum shutter speed you're going to be able to get without star trailing. So in this case, with the 500 rule, I only had 3.2 seconds. And that was the widest that lens would go. So what I had to do in order to make this work, I had to go up to 10,000 ISO, which is extremely high. And I highlight it here. I try not to go that high. It did introduce quite a bit of noise, which you could probably see in here. But anyway, it can be done. It's a neat little element to try with a telephoto lens. This was last summer. Was at a friend's cabin up in Colorado. I wanted to make this photo for him because he was very kind to let us stay at his cabin, and was able to do this. So we were all sitting by the campfire here. This is my friend, this is my wife, and that's my son Joshua. But he didn't know it at the time, but he thought I was just out there goofing around with my camera, but I was actually trying to make this photo for him, which turned out really, really nice as a nice, big, huge metal print. But that's the moon coming up. But anyway, it's nice. So this is a situation where I didn't really have the Milky Way at all. I had a nice, big, huge. The subject was the cabin at night with the lights. But then also, again, there's some similarities here. I had a really wide open aperture, 15 seconds, so you can see the sparks going up from the fire. So that's 15. You can tell that's 15 seconds right there, or a long exposure. I had enough light that I was able to go down to ISO 100, which doesn't happen that often. But it was a very, very nice, clean image, no noise. Again, you don't have to have the Milky Way or stars even. You can have the moon. This was taken out by Anniversary Trail. Setting sun had already gone down. The moon was quickly following a nice crescent moon. This is a case where, again, this is those times where you can use a telephoto. There's plenty of ambient light that I really didn't have to mess with the ISO at all. Fairly wide open aperture with 1.6 second or 1/6 of a second. And I say, I'm not constrained by those dark sky settings. So this was a really, this is a great time to go out and photograph, right after the sun sets. Because you can actually experiment quite a bit and still see. who asked me about Aurora? Did I see the Aurora? Bill asked me. So this was, anyone see this? All right, so what a night, huh? This was absolutely amazing. I went outside of my house, and I just, of course, you know, it doesn't look like this with your naked eye, right? You can see a little bit of color. Plus, I'm kind of blind, so I couldn't really see much anyway. But I took my camera out there, and I just, you know, I wasn't even taking a photo. I just turned it on, and it was starting to look like this. It wasn't this bright at that point. So I hauled off over to Deer Trap Mesa Trail, and that's where I set up with about 200 other people. We all had a great time. I probably saw some of you out there, maybe, I don't know. When I got there, I was the first one out there, but when I left, boy, it was party time. But I mean, this was, I have a time lapse video on my YouTube channel. Go subscribe. Of this, so I actually had 2 cameras operating. One doing a time lapse, which I turned into a video, and the other one I was taking photos. The A7R5 is the one I was taking the photos with. So, you know, of course, you know, I never see this. Nobody sees this here, right? So I didn't know what I was doing. I did read that if you're going to take pictures of Aurora, keep your shutter speed low, because if you do 15 seconds or, you know, more than 5 seconds, the light just kind of combines and turns into mush, and it's not, you don't get the detail that you actually you were seeing. So that's the one thing I remember. Okay, keep the shutter speed low, fast. Open this lens up all the way, and then of course my last variable was the ISO in that case. So I knew what that was going to be. I knew what that was going to be, and your ISO essentially that's was determined for me. But yeah, what a night, huh? Hopefully we'll get to see another event like that. I mean, it's supposed to be with the sun cycle right now, the way it is, we may be able to see more of this for the next year or so, hopefully. Another celestial event that occurred this year was the comet. I don't know if anyone saw the comet that was in the early morning sky. When was that? August? It was August period. Early morning sky, and then it went around the sun, and there was a time where they didn't know if that comet was going to survive going around the sun. They were thinking that it might disintegrate. Well, sure enough, it came around the sun just fine, and you can see it at night, early evening. This was actually taken early morning when it was still heading toward the sun. This was I think this has a journey of 80,000 years. So in 80,000 years, hopefully somebody will see it again. But again, you know, my settings were pretty much determined by the light, the ambient light that I had. I had plenty of ambient light. Going to weather.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt, but we are right at 8:30.
Oh, are we? Okay.
I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. If
Yep.
anybody has to head out, we understand. We'll let Jim keep going with his last section here. I just wanted to let everybody know that we're at time.
And this will go pretty quickly because this is actually the easiest. So weather, zooms, primes, doesn't matter. I try to stay at the wider end of things with my weather images. I'm using a tripod all the time. Once again, I will say for lightning, key is to not blow out your highlights. So it may be completely dark. And by the way, that's when I usually shoot lightning or weather. It's late in the afternoon, early evening. may be dark out there. You might be maybe lured into increasing the ISO, but what I'll say about that is if you increase your ISO too much, the sensitivity on your sensor is too great. You'll blow out the lightning. You won't see the detail in the lightning. I usually have a shutter speed around 3 to 15 seconds. Sometimes if you're in the afternoon, you can use a 3-stop neutral density filter. There are some downsides to that, though. I don't use it that often. And the downsides usually are, the biggest downside I will say is that you wash out the sky and you don't really see the lightning. That it's not as dramatic as you would actually see it. So you can use an ND filter, but be mindful of that downside. Yeah, and I talked about the aperture, the ISO. Incorporate city lights, which I do a lot in my photos. By the way, lightning safety, I do want to say one thing about, you guys all probably know about lightning safety, right? Probably preaching to the choir here, but this was taken on top of Pajarito Mountain board. This storm, because I was looking on my app, was over Santa Rosa, New Mexico, where that rain shaft was. Where that lightning hit, and you can imagine the distance between Pajarito Mountain and Santa Rosa. I calculated that lightning strike to be 30 miles away. The shaft was. So that for me was a clear, eye opener in terms of where lightning can hit. 30 miles from where the storm is actually. And of course, there's this crazy little thing here, which I actually sent this to a meteorologist for the Weather Service, asking him what his thoughts were on that, and he said, "Yeah, there was a funnel cloud that was detected out of that storm." Pretty cool. Try time-lapsing storms, and again, I have videos on my YouTube channel to go see. This is Los Alamos. Actually, this is one single flash, three bolts that came down at one time. It was kind of amazing, but you'll see my settings. Basically, what I say: get my ISO really low, medium f aperture, and I had a continuous shooting of every 15 seconds. I kept that shutter open for 15 seconds, and I kept the intervalometer on my camera working continuously, and I was able to capture that. That's the best way to capture lightning. It's just put your camera on a tripod, put it on time-lapse mode, keep it up, between 3 and 15 seconds, and you'll be able to get some really amazing lightning shots. This was last summer. I have a video on this as well. Really neat night that night. I was out there with my brother. This is one I was lucky. Didn't have an ND filter. Had my shutter speed at 1/5 of a second. Chances of getting lightning, that's pretty slow. I mean, pretty fast. I'm sorry. It's pretty fast. But I was just, praying that I was going to get something, and sure enough, I was able. This is out by Cabazon. Cabazon's actually behind me here. So this is looking west. Again, I was getting a nice sunset, that opening of the clouds at the horizon. This last summer, I love just, clean, simple, lots of negative space images. Probably my favorite photo from last year. This is where I had plenty of ambient light, didn't have an ND filter. I don't know why I didn't have one with me, but so the idea here is close down that aperture as much as I possibly can to make the shutter speed as long as I can. And it worked. I think this is the only lightning bolt I got of the day. This is down south of Encino. This is here, Anniversary Trail, great sunset storm that came through. Again, sorry, like a broken record here, but slow shutter speed, high f-stop. I think I did have an ND filter. Yeah, I did have an ND filter excuse me, and continue shooting. So I was, essentially in time-lapse mode with my camera. This is last October. I don't know if you all remember, we had 2 great storms, I think middle of October. I missed the first one because I was on travel, and then got home for the second one just in time. Have a time-lapse video on this one as well on my YouTube channel. And this is actually one of the images in the actual video. Okay, weather, you don't need lightning, okay? You can use fog. You can use all sorts of different kind of elements. So this is a case where I used a telephoto, another one of my cameras I'm using today. And this is a case where I'm using a pretty long telephoto lens to capture the detail on top of this mountain where this fog was coming in here. The one thing that I will say about this is I needed to have a shutter speed fast enough because this fog was really blowing. And plus it was really blowing where I was shooting too. So I wanted to, make sure I got the detail from that fog. This is a case where I was doing foreground elements as a window. So I was using a really wide open lens, really stop down my aperture so I can get as much of this in focus, although I wasn't able to get this in focus, but I can live with that. I don't mind out of focus elements like that. And then you have a nice scene. I think I was actually at 24 millimeters, so at 12 this was just way too far away. So I went in a little bit so I could still get the window of the foliage, and then also make sure I was able to get some detail in the background. You don't even need fog or rainbow. You can have a nice lenticular cloud above the sun rays. What else do you need? Pretty simple settings. I think this was handheld. It was handheld. I was using a pretty fast shutter speed because I was at handheld at pretty long focal length. Again, that's the other thing you're battling with telephoto lenses is lens shake, and my hands just are shaking all the time, as you can't tell. So the idea here is, how do I get that shutter speed as high as I possibly can to get a nice crisp image, wide open, f-stop. Depth of field doesn't matter with this kind of shot because everything is far away. So everything was, fairly straightforward. This is where I was taking pictures of birds. You can take nice weather shots from this. This was the sun had just risen. It's the Bosque del Apache. Lots of snow geese, middle of winter. And the sun was coming up through the fog. And of course you have that side lighting I've talked about many times before coming through that fog, and you have that nice foreground element. Oppenheimer. Anyone see? Does everybody know where the Oppenheimer set is out in Abiquiu? Well, that's where this is. Matter of fact, this is the day it was out there. There was a storm coming in, snowstorm actually. And okay, short story here. So I was out there, and I was on the dirt road going toward the monastery, and I saw all these buildings out there. And of course, I didn't know this was Oppenheimer's set, and I got really discouraged because I was like, "Man, they're building the town up there. What is this?" And I was like so angry, and I got out, stopped my truck, got my telephone, my super long telephoto lens out on my tripod, and looked up there. I have another shot that I didn't include in this, but it had the gate, the main gate, Los Alamos, just what you see, what you used to see way back when, and what you see coming up the highway now near the airport. And then I knew exactly what it was. I knew there was a set out there somewhere, but I didn't know. And then sure enough, that's what it was. But luckily there was a nice storm coming through right at sunset again. this fantastic light that was appearing at the core of the storm, and with the watchtower that's no longer there, by the way. And again, weather shot, no lightning. You don't need lightning. Matter of fact, sometimes I love getting these kinds of shots with some kind of nice, simple, clean image or element. Lots of negative space. Again, this is inspired by Ansel Adams and the Hudson River School, as you can tell. With this one, again, telephoto lens with a storm and a light hitting through the clouds. And that's all I have for this. So thank you. I apologize. I didn't mean for this to go as long as it did, but I'm glad you're all still here. So I guess that means something.
Jim,
questions?
we have one quick question from online, and then
Okay.
we can open it up to in here.
Okay.
Someone wants to know they just said they love the photos of New Mexico, but if you had to pick another area as a home base for photography, where would you choose? And if you want to go to your slide with your info on it, that would.
Another area, like I guess I need to know like location where I would want to go other than New Mexico. So I have a particular fondness of the Pacific Northwest. I love the Pacific Northwest. I was going to put up a couple of photos in here of San Juan Islands. Love that area. No people to very little people. Well, when I was there was no people. It's another great thing. So Pacific Northwest is an area that I would love to. I'm actually planning on going back there this year at some point. Another area that I love taking photos is up in upstate New York, where my brother lives, up in the Finger Lakes area. Catskill Mountains, Adirondack Mountains. Love that area. Okay, I saw a hand. Yeah.
So when you're shooting in the dark and you're going to are you able to rely on the light meter in the camera? Sometimes it seems like that's an issue. So if you've got everything set, like the last element is your ISO.
Yeah.
How are you coming to that? Are you able to use the light meter?
No, you can't. Yeah, exactly. At night, your night photos, you're not using a light meter unless you have ambient light.
And Jim, if you can just
Repeat the question. Yeah, so the question was, for my night photos, do I utilize a light meter, or how do I actually get correct exposure for my night photos? So this is one area, one genre of photography where practice is golden here. So I already know generally before I even go out what kind of ISO setting that I'm going to be shooting toward, depending on the ambient light. So I usually don't go above 3200 ISO. I try to stay actually around 1600 ISO at night. And if I can even get lower than that, using that 500 rule, depending, a lot of it depends on the focal length of your lens that you're using, incorporating that 500 rule, and then you experiment. You take many photos. A lot of things that I'm looking for is, are the stars nice and crisp? Do I have any light trailing? If I have light trailing, then I'll shorten the shutter speed even more, which means I may have to go up in ISO. Because generally, I'm always shooting at a very wide open aperture. So really two things are already set for you: your ISO and your shutter speed. And all of it's really set for you, right? So if you know you're going to do, wide open lens anyway, then that's set for you too. So that help?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Jim, are there any favorite apps on the phone?
Yeah. There's several. Actually, I should have put something up there. So for weather, I use an app called Radar Scope which will show you, it's a really nice, clean image on your phone where the storm cells are. I think you can buy a $10 pro subscription, which will actually show you where the lightning is and how frequent the lightning is. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention about lightning. Lightning has a cycle, okay? If you learn about that cycle, it doesn't last forever, but during a period when the storm is hitting, that lightning will hit on a regular basis through, probably a half hour. And if you get in that cycle and time your shutter speed to that cycle, you can actually get some nice clean single bolts that come down based on that, whatever that shutter speed is, it turns out to be. So that's another neat little thing to learn, is just watch the storm for a while and then count the seconds it takes. And it's actually on a pretty regular basis. And it doesn't last forever, like I said, but it's a neat little trick to learn. Yeah.
What do you do to protect your camera from blowing sand and rain, all the weather stuff?
Very good question. Yeah, so what do I do to protect my camera from rain and sand and the wind, the elements? What I'll just say is I have damaged my cameras in the past. I'm probably not the best person to answer that question because I'm still learning myself. But what I will say is that, people say, well, equipment doesn't matter. Just go out and take a photo with whatever camera you have. Well, I'm one of those who says that equipment does matter, okay? And the cameras that I have, the lenses I have are weather sealed. There's weather sealing elements from the lens where the lens attaches to the camera. I've had my camera out in driving rain. It's been fine. I've never had problems. Where you really have to worry the most when I'm out taking photos is changing lenses. Okay, like that sandstorm at White Sands, I didn't even touch any other lens. That's the only lens I had. And I just resigned myself. I drove all the way down there and I just used one lens, and that was fine. I didn't dare put on another lens in those conditions that day. So the weather sealing on your cameras these days are excellent. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. If early on, I actually still do use it quite a bit when it's driving rain. Is you can buy cheap plastic bags and that are built for cameras. You can put them on. But there's downsides to that too, because sometimes I'll take a whole series of photos and didn't realize I had the bag over my lens on accident and that sort of thing. You have to worry about that. But again, cameras these days are pretty good. It's not that I don't worry about it, but I worry less. Good question though. Yeah.
For landscape photos, what's your opinion on tilted objects like trees or buildings on the side?
So the question is, what is for landscape object or landscape photos, especially wide angle photos, where you have the perspective distortions, where you have trees that are leaning in or leaning out, depending on if your camera's pointing up or down. What's my perspective on it? I embrace it. I love it. There are times where it just doesn't work. It does look kind of ugly. That's another area where Photoshop can help you without altering the image. When I say alter, I mean creating something that's not real. But there are other ways you can get around that too, and that is try to shoot. If you have an extreme wide angle lens and you don't want to have that distortion, shoot flat. Shoot with your camera completely horizontal, and that takes out the distortions. And you can crop in post the way you want. You can take out the sky or take out the ground if you want. But for the most part, I love it. I think that's it's usually a nice element that I like to incorporate. one thing I do like about my photos, especially the wide angle ones, is, and I love shooting very wide angle, because I think this is the reason why I like it, is that's not how your eye sees. And it's a different perspective. And I like incorporating that different perspective in my imagery. So the more it's leaning, the better, for the most part, 99%. Good question. Any other questions?
All right, we'll watch for more questions. But I just want to say thank you again, Jim, for sharing all these wonderful photographs with us tonight and all of the information about them. Everyone, please remember to look out for the quick survey coming to your email, and check out the Peak website for some great programming coming up this throughout the rest of the winter. In case we actually get some snow, our snowshoe rental program is up and running. And if you'd rather think more about summer, our summer camps are now open for registration. So thanks everyone again for joining us, and have a good night.
So Beth, I just wanted to say one thing. If you just take your phone camera, point it to that QR code, it will pull up my website, which is on the left there.
You have a YouTube channel?
Yes, I do have a YouTube channel, by the way. It's the one that's listed at the very bottom. I do have some really neat time-lapse photos on that. And subscribe if you choose to do so. I think I have 5 subscribers. Did I mention that already? All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. You've been all great.